Okay, guys. Hey, how's it going? My name's Kyle. I'm one of the research people for the PDL research team. So, thanks for all your help in doing this, and hopefully we can discover something good. All right. So, we're going to find the periodontal space according to this definition right here. Okay. Um, I kind of drew up a small diagram. The periodontal space is essentially where those periodontal ligaments are going to clasp onto the tooth and form that nice tight omphosis. Um, on a radiograph, which is what we're going to be studying, this is a very good example of the lamina dura. It's that more radiolucent space between the dark radiopaque enamel of the tooth and the more radiopaque lamina dura, as we see kind of in there in that bone density right there. So our measurements, we're going to want to be taking the most superficial that we can get of a clearly defined periodontal space. Um, Obviously, all mouths are different, so we're going to see lots of variation, but we're going to hope to standardize that. So if you have any questions, kind of refer back to this little Word document, or you can email me. My name's Kyle, and my email will be attached to most of the PDFs or JPEGs that you're receiving. These are going to be the tooth numbers that we're taking. Um, so, yeah, here's kind of a small explanation, but that's enough about that. So, now let's, okay, we're going to be inputting our measurements into this spreadsheet right here, okay? And the images that you're receiving, they'll already have their patient information already entered in, whether they self-report clenching or jaw pain or migraines, Alzheimer's, all that stuff. So don't worry too much about that. Our space is going to be right here. The PDL within pixels. We'll convert it later into millimeters most likely. But for the time being, we're just going to be measuring in pixels to avoid errors in calibrating them. So we're going to be measuring basically the same way we do a perio chart. If you've ever taken measurements or perio charted a patient, we're going to be starting on the distal surface of number 2, we're going to the mesial surface, and the distal of 3, mesial, distal, mesial. And once we cross over midline, then mesial will be our first measurement, distal the next, mesial, distal, then we'll drop down to the bottom, and here once again we switch to distal, mesial, and so on and so forth. If you're not familiar with this, then just follow along with the spreadsheet. Okay, it'll be pretty self-explanatory and pretty helpful once we get to an X-ray. Here's some of the information that's already been entered in. We're going to want distal mesial or mesial distal, and in this case distal mesial. If you can't quite get a measurement because of overlap between a tooth, or you can't quite see it on the X-ray, we're just going to put that surface right there. Okay, so in this case I was able to get the mesial measurement but not quite the distal one, so we're just going to put that as a D right there instead of make somewhat of a bogus measurement. If you can see here, MIA is in a couple places. We're going to put MIA for teeth that are missing. Okay, so there's that. Okay, well, let's get to some examples. So we're going to be using ImageJ. It's free to download from the internet. There's a couple of YouTube videos that talk about how to use it and all the special stuff you can do and how to download it. It works for Mac. I'm working on a Mac or Windows, so either one. So we're going to go File, Open, and we're going to open up some images, all right? So in this case, we're going to go, let's see here. Okay, so let's see here. So once you open it up, the patient identifier will be marked right up here in red. And so once we know that, we're going to come over here to our Excel sheet. I had to search for it, but type the number in and you'll find it. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. Okay, so once we find it, it'll pop up right there, and I was working on it, so we're going to jump to tooth number 13, okay? So most of the x-rays we'll be receiving are on bite wing x-rays, but occasionally we'll have a full mouth x-ray. Full mouth is of course better. Research has shown that there's not a whole lot of variation in the periodontal space in the posterior teeth, depending upon the angulation of an x-ray. So if there's a periapical x-ray that gives a better view, feel free to use it. Or in this instance, if we take a look, so starting at tooth number 14, we can see we got a good view right here, so we're going to go ahead and zoom in quite a bit. We're going to process this image. We're going to sharpen its edges a little bit and smooth it down. And alright, so you feel free to do that if you want to. It's just this process, and you can play around with that. But essentially, it allows us to kind of get a better idea. This patient has some pretty bad bone loss. So it makes it a little trickier, but basically we want, that from that smooth side of the tooth to the lamina dura right there. And in this instance, we want to be as perpendicular to the surface of the tooth as we can, and as most superficial, so closer to the surface. So we're going to do that. We're going to take our measurement. Our little results box will pop up. We're going to take approximately 3 measurements of that same space, and we want to try and be consistent and be in the same spot. If you'll notice here, it'll also give you the angle of your line, and we want this to be fairly close, within 10 to 15 degrees probably. If you have one line like that and then one line like that, as you can tell, our angle's way off on that last one, so we don't want, and obviously it's way longer, so we would prefer to have, better angulation, so keep that in mind as well, but don't feel like you have to get the exact same angulation. Alright, so once we have our 3 measurements, we're going to go over here to results, or sometimes it's analyze, and we're going to summarize them, and that'll calculate our mean and our standard deviation. In this case, we're going to take the mean of all 3 of those measurements, which would be 5.873. And so we're going to punch that in, 5.873, and we'll put a little slash in it. Okay, now we're going to move on to the mesial surface, the distal surface over here. We can just clear out that data. Okay, so in this instance, we see a lot of overlap between number 14 or number 13, number 14. So it's going to be a little tricky for us to get a good measurement there. One thing we can do is we can refer to the other bite wing. In this case, it's been cut off. So instead of putting down a bad measurement, let's see, we don't really get a clearly defined periodontal space right there. We're just going to leave that one blank. So in order to mark that, we're just going to put the distal surface in this case. Okay, and we'll move on to the next tooth. And so, on this bite wing, we can't really see too much. But if we switch over to this one, once again, we're in a little bit of a tricky spot here. Looks like right here we get a small glimpse of the periodontal space, and since we can see this a little more clearly defined, we're going to go ahead and measure it from here. And so we're going to take the most superficial we can get, and once again we see probably that anterior root right there of 14 in the background. So remember, these are 3-dimensional teeth represented in 2-dimensional x-rays. And we'll take that measurement. And we'll take it again. Okay, feel free to take it as many times as you want to make sure that you can get a good, accurate representation. I don't quite like that one, so we're going to take it right there to right there. Okay, so you notice, we have a little bit of variation, and that's okay. That's why we're taking our good old statistical average right here of 6.33. Okay, 6.333. All right. And now that we have that mesial surface down, we're going to jump to the other X-ray over here, and see we get a much more clearly defined periodontal space right here. So feel free to zoom in as far as you want to. I'm going to once again process this and sharpen it up a little bit. And if we do that, feel free to play around with it a little bit. I'm going to kick up the contrast a little bit here. Okay. And so here, if we zoom out, once again we have the curve of our tooth kind of going down right here, and we see the presence of the lamina dura right here. And so we're going to want this space. I'm going to smoothen that. Alright, we're going to want that space right there. So once again, the most superficial space, and you can see the curve of the tooth right here, the presence of the lamina dura here, and I know it's pixelated, so we're going to attempt to measure the darkest pixels. So in this case, I didn't go quite far enough. We'd want to go right there to right there. See, once we start getting into those wider pixels, that's when we're really into the lamina dura. So we'll take our measurement there, take our 3 measurements, get a nice good composite measurement of that space. Analyze that, get our summary, 6.389. Okay. Alright, over here, we can, sometimes it helps to be zoomed out a little bit more, and it'll allow you to see that gum fossa a little bit better. And so if you want to take it a little zoomed out, that's definitely okay. So in this instance, hang on, I'm going to zoom in just a tad bit. Zooming in or out won't affect your measurements, so don't worry about that. It measures pixels, and pixels are the same whether you can see them up close or from afar. Once again, we're attempting to get a very similar angles, so 0 and 180 are the same. Just depends on which way you drag your arrow. So let's analyze that, and we get a good mean of 3.44. Okay, go ahead and clear that data out. This is an important point to note. Some patients will have wisdom teeth, some won't. Just remember that is 16, and we're not measuring that, so we'll be stopping here. Beware that on the other side as well when we're starting out. We don't want to start out measuring 1 instead of 2. So in this instance, let's see if we zoom out, we can see, okay, we definitely have the gum fossa joined up to this point, and we're looking for that clearly defined space. So we're going to zoom in. We'll sharpen that a little bit, and we kind of see that negative space right there. And so that's going to be our point. Once again, attempting to be, as close to perpendicular with the surface of the tooth that we can. So we'll take that one there. You can take these 3 fairly quickly in that same area, because we do have quite a few measurements to take. So 2.948. Okay. So I'll finish this one later, but I hope that kind of gives you an idea of more of what we're looking at. Just to go over a few quick examples, so we don't want to necessarily save any of the image changes. So we can close out of that data as well. In some instances, like this one, we'll have a full mouth x-ray, and the bite wings in this case don't give us a very good view of our upper teeth, and so we are definitely going to use the periapical x-rays in this instance. Feel free to use either or, and actually on this side we get just barely, but we can definitely see our periodontal space right in there. So zoom in, and sometimes you can see it a little more clearly defined. I can make a quick note about this one. So the operational definition, I believe, somewhat addresses this, but when we have teeth that are at a different angle, once again, we're going to attempt to go perpendicular to the surface of the tooth as best we can. So our measurement would be somewhere in there. And this patient, as you can take note, is missing a few mandibular teeth. They're missing actually their first premolars. And so in that instance, we would just put MIA because those teeth are missing. We're not necessarily going to measure their other lower anteriors. And in this case, we're really unable to see that number 31, and so we would just put it surfaces. It's still there, but we weren't able to measure it, so we'll take note of it like that. Let's take now look at another one. Yeah, not a whole lot to say about this one. This would be a very nice one to take measurements on. Lots of teeth, lots of good angles. If you have any questions, just remember the goal is to be as consistent as possible. It's okay to be off a little bit so long as we're all off making the same mistake, because we can correct for those. If you do receive some x-rays that perhaps don't make sense, like you received this one, or that's okay, just disregard it. If you receive a panoramic x-ray, or an x-ray that is a little different or doesn't have the exact teeth, do your best to match up the measurements. There will be some, not there. There will be some x-rays like this where it'll just be a single x-ray. So take what you can, but take note of this chart number and notify either me or Daniel. We've attempted to root these out, but we'll search out a better x-ray, or perhaps discard this due to lack of information. In the instance of a tooth like this, where we can see that there's been a definite abscess and some infection through this bone loss around here, we're going to take these out of our measurement, because this inflammation and this sort of loss of the joint is due more to infection. So I'm not asking you to diagnose a root canal and an abscess, but if you see an extreme case like this, just make note of that, and we're going to put INF for infection. Okay, so there's that example. When in doubt, feel free to email me as well. I'm pretty available for email. Oh, not that one. I want, let's see here. So some of the x-rays will look like this. In this instance, these are film x-rays that have been scanned in and converted to a digital format. So do your best, but once again, if it's missing teeth or they're unviewable, that's okay. Just note that, put those sides in there, and we'll either discard the patient later or figure out what to do with him. Thanks. I hope this video has been instructional, and thanks once again for your help.